What's up, Barnhill family? Welcome back to the channel.
Yo.
Guys, Nick and I are going to be bringing you some of what's been requested, which is a bit of a longer podcast hangout format for you. So we're still going to do the clips post-fight, break them down, talk about X's and O's, give predictions, things like that. But then once a week, we're going to try to deliver a longer form podcast where we get more in depth and you guys can chat and get to know us a little bit better. So with that said, Nick, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Oh,
man?
good, man. I'm a little sore from all this training we've been doing this week with these killers from Gracie, Baja, Texas that are hopefully going to go win some gold medals and rack up some victories at the Pan Ams this weekend.
Yeah, we always do a lot of regular live training, but whenever there's a big event like this, like the Pan Ams or the Worlds or something like that happening, everybody revs up the live training, and so it's been tough. I feel cooked right now.
Yeah, cooked is a good word for it. And you know when you have all of these black belts from Brazil that are just the nicest people in the world, so knowledgeable, so technical. You know, at our gym alone, we have Lucas Valenche, Andressa Sintra, Jordan Weissman. These are all black belt gold medalists, brown belt gold medalists, all competing in the black belt division. And you can always tell when a big competition's coming up because they're still always as nice as they are, except you tend to do a little more tapping. You tend to get beat up a little more. There's an intensity in the room. And this is going to be a big – I mean, jiu-jitsu is just growing as a sport. And I know we talk mainly about MMA and some boxing on this channel, but I mean, jiu-jitsu is bigger than it's ever been right now.
It's making its way, and there's a few superstars that are kind of emerging that came strictly from jiu-jitsu, and they've kind of helped grow the sport, you know, the Gordon Ryans and stuff. Obviously, when a big name from MMA or something other than MMA comes into jiu-jitsu or submission grappling, there's some attention around it, but it's really cool to see people growing that sport from like the ground up. From they started as a jiu-jitsu practitioner, and now they've moved into just submission grappling, and even some of them are able to make a living, which it's really cool.
And it's cool to me because there's some people that could be killers in MMA that just have no desire to do that. You know, it's that I want to compete in jiu-jitsu, build my name in jiu-jitsu, open up a school, and then teach young people and help people that way. And the martial arts is so much more than just what you see on TV sometimes.
Yeah,
you know?
It's a great life you can live. I mean, and it's so funny because in Houston, we're really lucky because we have such good grappling here. But the Gracie Baja, every school has their gold medal world champions and their black belt world champions. And so the Gracie Baja team here in Houston and all of Texas really is super strong. It's really impressive to see the kind of talent that they have here. And obviously it's really awesome that we get to train with them every day.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of big names, Jake Paul, Tyron Woodley, that's kind of the two biggest names that are being discussed, and that's what all the content is sort of centering around right now, this big boxing match that's going to take place on Sunday. Yeah. Obviously, the match I'm most looking forward to, Giga Chikadze versus Edson Barbosa, will happen Saturday night. We'll get to that a little bit later on in this episode, but I want to start off with Jake Paul, Tyron Woodley, because it's always drama there, but it seems like now Tyron's mother's involved somehow, and somebody from Jake's team has disrespected Tyron's mother at the face-off today. This is all kind of building to a big event, and you can feel it. It feels like even though the technical X's and O's and actual talent level is not that of a mega fight like a Canelo fight weekend or a huge UFC championship card or whatever, you don't get the same talent level, but there definitely is the same excitement and same build up and same buzz building around this. Yeah, and now drama.
Yeah, there's a big fight feel around it, and it's a kind of unprecedented. We've never really seen anything quite like what Jake Paul's bringing to boxing. You know, Tyron Woodley's doing his part. He's been really good with the social media and trying to hype this fight up as well. You know, it takes two to tango, and to have a big fight that really does big numbers, you have to have two guys that are willing to do what they do, go the extra mile. Jake Paul, obviously, he's always going viral. He's always, you know, poking and prodding, and a lot of people don't like him. But I have to say now, after seeing a lot of the footage that's come out and the press conference that took place today, a lot of people don't like Jake Paul, but I would venture to say even more people don't like his team, the people around him. And they're hard to like, to be completely honest. I'm not a big fan of those guys. Tyron Woodley is, you know, I believe, has gained more fans during the buildup of this fight than he ever did in the UFC.
Yeah.
And this fight kind of is the real version of MMA versus celebrity boxing. Like, is the MMA guy actually a good enough striker to beat the guy who's putting enough time in, but still isn't a true legitimate boxer that people fear in boxing, you know?
It's going to be interesting. And I don't think I've ever seen the tide turn on a fighter being an unpopular guy who a lot of people kind of badmouth Tyron, which I think he got the short end of the stick unfairly at times. I do think, if I'm being honest, there were certain times where Tyron did some things where he kind of didn't make any fans and didn't do himself any favors. But at the same time, I do feel like he got an unfair shake. But I feel like all of that has just been thrown out the window, and everybody in the MMA community is just riding and hoping and praying that he starts as Jake Paul. Yeah. And Jake Paul, listen, his brother boxed Floyd Mayweather, but I think long before that, these two have taken a page out of Floyd Money's book, which is Floyd Money Mayweather didn't sell pay-per-views because he was knocking out people like Tyson. He didn't sell pay-per-views because he had the entire country of Mexico behind him, like Canelo. He didn't sell pay-per-views because he's this loudmouth Irish guy named Conor McGregor that's got a 90% knockout ratio. Right. He sold pay-per-views because he made people hate him and despise him to the point that they literally pressed buy on a $70 pay-per-view and sat down on their couch, got their popcorn and their drinks ready, hoping and praying that he gets knocked out so they can have, you know, a couple of minutes worth of enjoyment. And that's what Jake Paul is doing. I mean, I honestly think you're going to have the YouTube Jake Paulers, the people who follow him, that love him on social media, young kids.
They're pretty strong.
Yeah, they're going to tune in because he's their boy. Yeah. But there's going to be just as many, if not more, people that are tuning into this fight that are literally banking $70 on the fact that they're going to have a great Sunday evening watching this loudmouth kid with neck tattoos that talks a lot of crap get knocked out by Tyron Woodley.
Yeah, and Tyron seems like the kind of guy that can do the job. That's why I think people like him so much, because they think he's going to be the one that comes in, the knight in shining armor that slays the dragon that is Jake Paul. I really think that you said something earlier that Tyron Woodley really changed the tides on himself and how the MMA community and really the fight community in general sees Tyron Woodley. And now they've become fans. People that weren't fans of him as a UFC champion or a fighter for that matter are now big fans of him. I would have to say that people haven't looked at Jake Paul like or a sport hasn't changed their opinion on a fighter like Jake Paul. Yeah. Jake Paul was people are like, oh, he probably can't even beat this rapper or whoever it was that he fought first. And, oh, well, Nate Robinson, he was an athlete, so he probably can't beat him. And then, it's like, well, Ben Askren, he was an Olympian. He's, a competitor to the highest level. And Jake Paul just knocked them all out, made it look really easy.
I was guilty on multiple fronts there as well.
Well, you have to assume, and you watch his boxing skills in those first few fights, and they weren't great. He looked like an amateur skilled boxer that was fighting professionally for a lot of money. And he looked actually pretty good and composed against Ben Askren, but still not like you tune into PBC Boxing or Showtime Boxing and watch some of those professionals that are 15, 20-0 and they actually move like real professionals. He's not there. He's not there yet. But you throw out an MMA fighter's name, which he seems to be calling out MMA fighters more than boxers. Yeah. You throw any of their names into the hat, and everybody's going, "Oh, Jake Paul's just going to knock them out. They can't strike with him." So it's funny to see how everybody was like, "Oh, he probably can't beat these YouTubers," and now they're like, "Oh, Jorge Masvidal, he's calling him out." Well, I don't know. I don't know how Jorge's going to do with him. He is pretty big,
It's funny how that has turned, and Jake Paul really has shown that he's putting the time in. For example, if you were to have an MMA fighter, right, and Jake Paul and his brother wanted to go a different direction. Let's say they wanted to do jiu-jitsu competing, just by way of example, and Jake went and moved to, well, it would have been Puerto Rico, but formerly New York City at Renzo Gracie Academy, and joined the Danaher Death Squad with John Danaher, and spent 4 years training twice a day under John. and learning the skill and the art of that one specific martial art and living that lifestyle, and then he were to say, you know what, I think I want to grapple Israel Adesanya, and people say, oh, you got to be kidding me. This kid's only been training for 4 years. Israel Adesanya is a world champion. How is that going to happen? But you could see a situation by which, okay, you're talking about a different rule set, a very specific rule set, one that he's trained completely and uninterrupted for 4 years. And you're talking about a fighter who mixes that rule set into everything else he does in daily training. Yeah. You could see how this could be an interesting situation. And that's why I think this fight is going to be an interesting and competitive fight. Yeah. Because Jake Paul has been, he's got all the money that he needs to put the team around him. He's got great coaches, great boxing coaches, great sparring partners, great strength and conditioning coaches, and he's putting all of his effort and all of his eggs in the boxing basket. Yeah. And now you have Tyron, who's, a little bit smaller in stature, a little bit older. Yes, he's got some great knockouts. Yes, he's got the ability to rise to the occasion. Anybody who's ever put on a UFC gold strap has the ability to rise to the occasion and handle pressure well. I think the strap itself is evidence of that. But at the same time, he hasn't been doing for the last 4 years what Jake Paul's been doing. And if you think 4 years is too short of a time, just remember Gordon Ryan became a jiu-jitsu world champion. I think he was 6 years in. 6 or 7 if I'm wrong. Yeah. So 4 years' time of extreme dedication with the best team money can buy can make a real difference.
Yeah, and Gordon Ryan's special. He's a special athlete, a little bit different than Jake Paul. And I think those 6 years, he might have been doing a little bit more grinding than Jake Paul.
Yeah,
Jake Paul does still do his rapping and, makes videos and pranks people and does that kind of stuff. But
Gordon just trolls people on Instagram.
Yeah, Gordon just gets online and savages people. But Jake is you're right. He's putting the right team around him. And one thing still stuck out to me when you said strength and conditioning. His body for the last few fights, or all of the fights, really his body since we've known who Jake Paul was, hasn't been very impressive, especially compared to his older brother Logan or even Tyron Woodley. But Logan looks like he might be, on something or on the, he looks as good as a human being can look.
Their craniums have grown, and I'm not one to accuse anybody of anything, but usually your head doesn't get bigger just from going to the gym.
No, it doesn't. That's the one part of the body you really can't exercise very much, and their heads have seemed to grow a little bit. So and as well as all their muscles. Yeah. But Jake does look more fit this time around.
He does.
It looks like maybe, I don't know if he purposefully pulled weight, and we haven't seen him weigh in yet, so I don't know what his weight is at. But it looks like he might come into this fight slightly trimmer than he did for the Ben Askren or anything before that. But yeah, he always was a chiseled guy that had like a baby face, and now he's got like a round face. It looks red at times, and those are some of the telltale. You go to some of the local gyms that people pump iron in, and you see that very similar face shape and size. And we don't have to get too much into that, but I think there's some wheels.
You can infer what we're saying here.
Yeah, I think he might be gassing. Right? As they say.
On the gear.
But his brother for sure is. You can't look like that. At 6'3" and 200 something pounds. Only a very few amount of people on this planet have ever looked like that and actually been natural. And their names are people like Francis Ngannou and stuff like that.
Exactly. Yeah. And when you have USADA testing you, it's a different story. And a lot of, not just boxers, but jiu-jitsu competitors, wrestlers, they've all been notorious for getting away with, and not always getting away with, sometimes getting caught. But
hey, there's UFC fighters that I watched last weekend that I know for a fact are on the gas. They're taking stuff, and you can just see it in their body. And there's certain things that you look for, and if you dive into the world of performance enhancers, you can kind of tell who's on what. But
I remember you saying when we were watching a PFL one night, why is it that all of the PFL fighters have so much bigger nipples than the UFC fighters?
Every one of them. And they all,
and it's so true, actually, when you said that.
They're all more jacked. They look like CrossFitters. And CrossFitters they're pretty open about their performance enhancing use. Like for the most all of them.
I don't know anything about CrossFit, but
I don't
maybe,
know anything about it, but they all look the same. And then, you see some of the guys in the PFL, aside from like, Rory McDonald. Everybody pretty much looks like they're on
the gear, yeah. But it's going to be interesting. And, you know, we talked about Jake Paul calling out MMA fighters, and I think that's because his boxing skill set can cover the ground that the athleticism and the fight competition of somebody like Woodley or Ben Askren brings to the table, and that professionalism and all that. But the reality is there's no big names in boxing that aren't really, really good boxers. Right. I mean, name me, you have Terrence Crawford, Canelo Alvarez, Teofimo Lopez, you have Lomachenko, you have the Charlo brothers, Errol Spence Jr., Gervonta Davis, and then the heavyweights. But, you know, Jake Paul's not fighting any of those guys anytime soon, and it would be a huge mistake if his
even
management...
the 130 guys.
Right. Yeah, Gervonta Davis would start Jake Paul in the first round.
Brutally.
Yeah, and so, you know, it has to be MMA fighters, or it has to be wrestlers, or it has to be somebody where the name is big, but the advantage is still there. Yeah. And Tommy Fury is also on this card. And, you know, Tommy Fury, he was on that show Love Island, I believe. I've never seen it, but I've heard it was pretty popular in the UK. And
he was well liked on it. I didn't see it, but I kind of got a synopsis of, like, he was well liked, and he met the girl that he went off with is well liked, and so they have a pretty big social media presence and fame out there in the UK.
So maybe Tommy's the guy, because I mean, like we talked about last time, we did a video about this boxing match that Tommy Fury literally had an opponent that was 10 and 102.
Yeah,
it's like the guy has been in the ring more than 100 times in his life, and he's lost 102 of those times that he's been in there.
That's insane.
Really insane. So I honestly, before you criticize Jake Paul, go back, and some of them aren't as egregious as 10 and 102, but go back and look at Floyd Mayweather's first 10 fights.
Canelo.
Go back and look at Canelo's first 10 fights. I mean, I get it. I understand where people are coming from, and they say, you know, you're saying you're going to knock out Canelo Alvarez. And when you do say stuff like that, it does make you look a bit silly.
Yeah.
And nobody, including Jake Paul, believes that he would knock out Canelo Alvarez. Right. And if they did, they'd probably need to get checked.
Yeah.
But, you know, the reality is, I do think that I think Tyron Woodley, I'll say this, Tyron Woodley is as tough of a fourth opponent for a professional boxer as you could probably get.
Yeah, and I totally believe that. I think this is the right step up for him. I think it was a good call out, and it just works. This fight just works. And Tyron wasn't on our radar until all of a sudden he was the perfect match.
Yeah.
I think that in MMA you have so many plates you have to spin. You're going to wake up, go to jiu-jitsu, or wake up, go to wrestling, and then later on in the afternoon you got boxing, you got Muay Thai, you got to do all of the types of martial arts that there are. And if you had a 15-year career or a 10-year career in MMA, which is a long time, but you spent time in all of those disciplines, you really might have only gotten about 4 years of boxing, right? Yeah. So it is kind of an even match. And I think that Jake Paul dedicating 4 years, and he's been pretty consistent and pretty motivated as far as like getting his training in and prioritizing. He looks like a boxer that's been boxing for 4 years. Tyron Woodley moves like a fighter that's been fighting for 15 years and competing for his whole life. But when you watch him box, he does look like a boxer that's kind of got accumulated about 4 or so 5 years of boxing. So it's a pretty fair fight. I'm looking forward to it. I still think Tyron's going to get the job done. If Jake gets him out of there and finishes him the way he's been finishing everybody else, I'm going to be really impressed. And I don't know if I'll go against Jake Paul again, but hold me to this one, because I do think this fight he is gonna lose.
You read my mind. I was actually going to say, before we move on to Chikadze Barbosa, do you want to give a final prediction? So you're going Tyron Woodley.
Yeah, I think so.
You know, I'm going to go Tyron as well. Also, nobody disrespects Mama Woodley. And I think if Tyron was at all going to take this lightly and go easy on Jake, he's not now. Yeah. And Tyron Woodley's a scary guy when he starts letting his hands go. He kind of seemed checked out in the UFC the last couple fights, last 4, to be honest. But when Tyron Woodley's throwing heavy bombs with bad intentions, if you're not the highest of skilled fighters, you better watch out, because if you get clipped with one of them, you're going to sleep. And I think he's going to have just a little bit bigger of a chip on his shoulder come Sunday evening.
I'm
going T Wood 4th round TKO.
Yeah, that's a good call. And I think speed's going to play a role.
Yeah.
Tyron's been an explosive guy, but explosion also means speed.
Yeah.
And Jake is a bigger guy, so bigger guys are usually slower. And Tyron was known as a fast guy, so at his weight class in the UFC. So I think we're going to see a little bit of a speed advantage for Tyron. And he's going to catch him at some point. Maybe not put him down or out, but he'll put him down, or maybe they'll both touch the canvas.
Yeah,
I could see it going all the rounds and be going to a decision.
It's possible, yeah.
But anyways, I'm excited. They're going to give us a great night of fights, and I'm glad they didn't put it on Saturday, so we have to compete with Giga and Edson. Because you know me, I'm going to go with that fight. But I did. The mark in me definitely wants to see this fight.
Yeah, there's a market for both. And I mean, clearly, as people who watch this channel regularly know that, like, we're pure MMA fans. Like, that's our sport. And so a striker's dream like Giga Chikadze versus Edson Barbosa would definitely take priority over the Jake Paul, Tyron Woodley spectacle. But I am happy that they're happening on 2 separate nights, and I don't think that's by mistake.
No.
So I'm very excited for that.
Yeah.
And this is I'm actually excited to talk about the fight because it's a fight where we can break down the X's and O's a little bit better. All we can really talk about Jake Paul and Tyron is how they looked on the pads, whatever the heck that weird stretching open workout thing
Yoga,
that Jake Paul does. Totally for the trolling and the content, I'm sure. But Tyron looked pretty good on the pads. I'd like to see a little bit more extension on the punches, but he was getting some combos off. He looked comfortable. He looked good in a boxing stance, which it is different than an MMA stance, and he looked like he was adapting well.
Yeah. So, I think he looks good. I think he's hiding some things. I think he's got some tricks up his sleeve. He's going to unleash them when the show comes on. Hopefully the big lights and the big moment don't get to him. Hopefully, obviously the mental warfare is real. Jake Paul's trying to get under his skin. That's why they had them poke and prod at Mama Woodley. And if you can get him out of his wits a little bit, that's what Jake needs. He needs not 100% Tyron Woodley facing him in the ring. But I think that this UFC fight that we're talking about, Giga Chikadze and Edson Barbosa, is one of the highest level striking matches that we've seen in quite some time. The UFC's had some good fights, great fights that we didn't know about, but some of the cards besides 265, the pay-per-view, have been a little bit underwhelming. And this one feels like we're going to get a major fight.
August has been like a breather month for the UFC.
We'll give it to them because they just pile great fight and great card after great card.
And the fall and the winter is just stupid. I mean, I can't even wait to get into those fights and all of the pay-per-views that are coming. But Giga Chikadze said, look, I'm the best striker in the UFC. Yeah. I want to fight Max Holloway. I want to knock out Max Holloway. He was the guy. I mean, he's on an absolute tear right now. 2 KOs in a row, most notably, biggest win of his career, Cub Swanson. Yeah. And he sets these KOs up with great kicks, whether it's a body kick or a head kick, and then he follows them up with ground and pound TKO. Edson Barbosa's throwing with bad intentions these days. I've been very impressed with how his boxing has continued to improve. I watched him knock out Shane Burgos personally. Probably one of the scariest knockouts I've ever seen in my life because it was like a delayed reaction, and the fact that I was there in person, it was like you almost could have heard a pin drop when he just kind of fell like that. It was very scary, very disturbing, and I'm glad he's okay. But the reality is this fight is going to be 2 guys throwing heavy, and I think it's going to come down to who can dictate the pace of the fight and who is kind of fighting on their heels. Yeah. Because both of these guys are going to come forward and try to bang. I think Giga will be a little bit more reserved and a little bit more cautious than Edson. I think we know what he's doing. Yeah. He's coming forward with heavy leg kicks, a good Muay Thai stance. Muay Thai fighters pride themselves on they're like, what is a step backwards? We don't even know what that is. Yeah. That doesn't exist in Muay Thai. You go forward, and so Edson is like that. I think he's going to come forward, and if he's able to get in that range where he can set up the leg kicks and then work the boxing, especially the body. He was landing some really nice body hooks against Shane Burgos. Then we might see him pull off the upset here because I do believe Giga is the favorite. But I'm kind of leaning towards Giga to win this fight. There's just certain fighters where you feel like this is their time. Yeah. And I feel like at 145, Giga, he's a 33-year-old guy, but he's young in the sense that he hasn't had a whole lot of MMA fights, hasn't taken a whole lot of damage. He's kind of new to the UFC, new-ish. and he's been on a tear, so he hasn't really taken any damage recently. And I think he's just got all of the stars aligned for him right now.
Yeah.
He's most importantly, he feels that confidence, and he feels very, very sure in his skill set. And I think he's going to go in there, be patient. This is a main event. This is 5 rounds. The lights are going to be shining bright on him in a month where really there's not been a whole lot of breakout performances, especially in the main event slot, that he's probably going to try to seize his moment here. And if he can finish Edson, a guy who really has only lost by split decision at 145, which I thought he won that fight. I think he should be undefeated at 145. That is the marquee win, even more so than Cub Swanson. And I think now you have, after that, if Giga wins, and my prediction comes true, a true title contender at 145.
Yeah, I think you're right. Giga's really cool. It's, everybody that watches fights got really excited when Zabit and Yair came on the scene, and they were these really amazing strikers, but their inactivity has kind of made us forget about them. They hadn't done enough for us to where we've bought a ton of time. But Giga is pretty active. He's staying consistent with his competing, and he's putting on really good shows, and his striking is very entertaining. So eventually one day I'd like to see all 3 of those guys pair up in different situations. But Giga is very, very good. But Edson Barbosa is the problem, the trouble at 145 that we thought he was going to be. He was a troublemaker and a big problem for people at 155. And when he dropped down and made that lifestyle change, sort of like Jose Aldo did, and just brought his body down to a more, obviously a leaner frame, but a frame that he feels is more natural for his body.
Yeah.
It was like,
and he looks
all over.
great.
Yeah, I think Edson, we say Giga, this could be his time, and I do believe that, but Edson's fighting for his. He thinks it's his time too. I do think that Edson's the caliber fighter that believes and shows us that he could be a UFC champion. And maybe this is the best division for him to try to do that, because he has had so many matches with the guys at the top of 155, and some of those didn't go his way. So you go get a fresh coat of paint down at 145. You go see how you do down there. He's doing really well. Most people, general consensus is that he won that first one. He's undefeated at 145. And if he beats Giga, who's got a lot of steam behind him right now, I think that we'll see Edson quickly walk his way right into a title.
Yeah, I definitely could see the winner putting themselves in title contention, especially with the finish, because a finish over either one of these guys would be a crazy feather in your cap to have on your resume. And both of these guys, we know the way they fight, especially Giga didn't have as many TKO finishes when he came into the UFC, but he's on a 2 KO streak right now, and they've been vicious ones. And Edson, we know he's got some of the most ridiculous highlight reel spinning head kick, switch kick knockouts that the UFC's really ever seen. So
put people down with leg kicks.
It's incredible. It really is. The funny thing about this fight is, and I think I talked about it once before, both of these guys are from very grappling heavy countries. Edson is Brazilian, so you have the Gracie family as jiu-jitsu royalty, essentially, down there, and he is a very good grappler. I believe he's a brown belt. And then Georgia, where Giga Chikadze comes from, is very famous for its wrestling. They've got some incredible world champion and Olympic champion wrestlers, and yet this is a striker versus striker match. So it kind of takes the conventional knowledge of what you think of, okay, this guy's out of Dagestan, he must be a great wrestler, or this guy's out of England, he must be a great boxer, like Paddy the Baddy, who's coming to the UFC. No, he's actually a submission ace.
Right.
So it's cool, and I think it's worth noting that people from different parts of the world are developing skill sets that are kind of unusual for their area of the world, and I think that's just making the sport that much better.
Yeah, and it's cool because maybe a decade from now, Giga Chikadze will, inspires a lot of young Georgian people to become strikers, and then you've got a country that's known for its history in the grappling world, and now they're starting to make their name in the striking world. So it's very interesting. I love it. Mixed martial arts is the most it's the most worldwide sport that we have. Obviously soccer's really big, but there's literally champions in the UFC right now that come from
Every continent in the world.
Every continent. How cool is that? Every continent, and they come from all different backgrounds, and you don't have to have a great team, or you don't have to have a great, facility around you to become a world champion or to become a UFC fighter. And that's what makes it so special. Anybody, as long as you have the ability to train and work and you have the dedication and discipline, you can make it to the highest level in MMA, and the UFC is the best platform for that. I really do love how Giga Chikadze is coming and they're representing Georgia. You've got like Merab Dvalishvili representing Georgia, and he's great with the wrestling. He's as advertised. I say all the time he's the worst matchup possible at 135 for Sean O'Malley
by far.
His gas tank doesn't even not go away. It doesn't even like lower a little bit.
Yeah, he doesn't go below half a tank.
Yeah, and like he's still hopping around and excited and ready to fight more when the fights are over for him. So he's trouble. Yeah. But he's the wrestling type of guy out of there, and it's cool to see that country starting to emerge as somebody or as a country that has some people that you have to watch out
Real
for.
Title contenders.
And if Giga wins this fight, he could be one of the first people to take, or probably the first person to take a UFC or a major MMA strap to Georgia.
Yeah, it would be very cool. And then also on this card, we have, and we'll get back to predictions here in a second, but I want to talk about the other fight that I'm super excited about, and that's the return of Kevin Lee. Yeah. He had some drama with some opponent changes and things like that, but he's going to be fighting D-Rod, Daniel Rodriguez, who's a product of the BMF Ranch, Cowboy, Joe Schilling, those guys. He's one of these he's exactly what you would think he is. Yeah. Tattooed up, old school kickboxers.
Hispanic,
very tough, very durable. I believe he's never been knocked out. Mm-hmm. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he has 0 knockouts on. He has knocked a few people out. He does not have any knockouts, any blemishes that way on his record.
He looks like an MMA fighter.
He does. Yeah, when you think of what an MMA, like if you were going to cast an MMA fighter in a movie, you pick up the phone and call D-Rod. And if you need a short notice opponent, you call the BMF Ranch and say, who you got in the stable over there? Because all of those guys will take fights on short notice.
That's right.
I like D-Rod, but I really like this matchup for Kevin Lee. D-Rod's not much of a grappler. You know what you're going to get. You're going to get heavy punches. He's going to go for the kill. He's going to try to knock Kevin out. But Kevin's pretty sensible on the feet. He doesn't take unnecessary risks very often, and he seems to find his shot. He's had trouble with really good jiu-jitsu guys where he gets top pressure and he gets, overextended into a triangle against Tony Ferguson. I don't see that being a factor at all here with D-Rod. I believe that D-Rod's going to try to stand with him, and I think Kevin Lee is going to be able to implement his wrestling, show that he's taken some time to improve himself. And I'm really looking forward to this fight for Kevin Lee.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing Kevin Lee back in action. I'm really looking forward to seeing that new head tattoo. Can't say I'm a fan of it.
You got a head tattoo?
Oh, yeah.
I haven't seen that.
It's a showstopper. It's a sight for sore eyes. It's rough. Yeah. I mean, it was well done. I won't take any credit away from the tattoo artist that did it. I don't know who did it, but it is not my style of tattoo. It's like a samurai's head samurai's helmet.
I must not have seen a recent picture of Kevin because I've not seen that.
It's wild. I wasn't expecting him to go full on head tattoo Post Malone style, but he went with it, and I guess he rocks it. If anybody can wear a head tattoo samurai helmet, it's Kevin Lee. But yeah, I'm really excited to see him. Fresh coat of paint. This is at 170, right?
Yeah.
So this is good. I think this is a good entry fight for him at 170. I felt like maybe he bit off more than he can chew at 155, a little bit too early for him. And he had more confidence in himself than anybody else. He thought even on those fights that he was losing that he was getting the better of those, and maybe some exchanges he was, but this is a whole fight, and you have to really pay attention to the entire duration of the fight. And he wasn't, overwhelming Tony Ferguson with anything that he couldn't handle. He wasn't, beating some of those guys that ended up submitting him or finishing him, Charles Oliveira. And I do think that this is a favorable matchup and a good matchup for Kevin Lee. I think he can win this fight. There's going to be a little bit of a size difference, but he'll likely be able to make up for that with his wrestling and the lack of wrestling out of Rodriguez.
D-Rod,
Yeah. I think that what he's going to do is win by any means necessary. And if that means maybe I won't gain a bunch of fans with a super exciting fight, but I'm going to get a victory because he needs it.
Yeah,
you know,
my God, does he need a victory?
He needs a victory really bad. And if he has to hold somebody down against their will and wrestle them and do a little ground and pound for 3 rounds, then so be it. He's fine with that. And I think that's what we're going to see. I think we're going to see a decision, unanimous decision for Kevin Lee. I think he's going to utilize a ton of wrestling, not try to stand and bang with the guy that loves to stand and bang.
Yeah.
And I think we're also in a weight class up from where he's used to fighting. I think this is a good matchup for Kevin, and I think he gets back to his winning ways on Saturday night.
On short notice, I think D-Rod's going to be able to last all 3. He's a tough, durable guy. And then Kevin, I don't think Kevin's going to submit him, which would be the way I would see him finishing the fight if he were to finish it. I do think that Kevin could grind him out to a finish if it was going into rounds 4 and 5, just because taking a fight on short notice, you don't know how well conditioned he is, and wrestlers tend to grind people out. Yeah. And so I think maybe Kevin could get a finish if the fight was going 25 minutes, but at 15, I'm going to stick with your same prediction. I think we're going to see a decision 30-27 for Kevin Lee in his return. And I'm excited. I'm surprised he's not the co-main event. I mean, Kevin Lee, he's cooled off. I'll give you that, but he's still kind of a big name. People know who Kevin Lee is.
Yeah, he's kind of down the bill. I think he's 3 or 4 fights down.
Yeah, I think he's not the curtain jerker on the main card, but he's the second fight on the main card, I think.
Yeah, well, maybe they wanted to space out the good fights so you have people watch for longer and not just tune in for the last couple fights. Kevin Lee has the potential to be a huge star. Yeah. And if his skills can back up his trash talking and his look and his, he screams superstar, right? Like Kevin Lee's marketable.
For sure.
Make no mistake about it. All you got to do now is win. And that's the hardest part in this game because there's so many tough people. And I love it because it's so opposite of boxing where, hey, you think you're good, you think you want to be world champion, then you're going to be fighting the best of the best every single time you go out there. And that's why you do see people, like Kelvin Gastelum, who just fought this weekend, 1-4 in his last 5. And generally you'd think, well, maybe it's time for him to get his walking papers. But you go look at that record, the list of people that he's fought, and you're like, Jesus Christ, who wouldn't be 1-4 in those fights?
Right,
so, I do think that Kevin's kind of in the same position as Kelvin. Funny they have similar names, but I think he gets the win.
Yeah, and I think Kevin moving up to 170 was a good idea, and I also think Kelvin Gastelum moving down to 170 would also be a good idea, but that's a topic for another video. Yeah. I mean, Kelvin Gastelum, he's losing to only the best at 185. He's clearly undersized, and if the visual test says anything, indicates anything at all, it looks like with the right dietitian and the proper routine, he could probably get down to that 170. Sure. And my God, would I love to see Kelvin Gastelum versus Kamaru Usman, or Kelvin Gastelum versus Leon Edwards, or Kevin Lee. I mean, I actually would think Kelvin would win that fight because he's so good everywhere. But yeah, we'll do another video about Gastelum when his next fight gets announced. But I want to talk about one fight that has been announced that before we wrap this longer form video up, and that is Justin Gaethje versus Michael Chandler. Oh. They have sorted that out. That's going to happen November 6th. Can we just go ahead and cut the fight of the night bonus checks now?
Yeah, I mean, it's either going to be fight of the night or performance. One of these guys could get finished. And I think that they know, both of them know good and well exactly how the people feel about them and their fighting style. And we know they know what we expect out of them, and they're more than willing to give it to us every single time they step out there.
Excited to give it to us.
Yeah, exactly. Especially Justin Gaethje. I mean, he is the human highlight reel. And Michael Chandler is this literally like a bomb that's going to go off the entire time he's fighting. And it's just this is the MMA community's dream matchup that we've all wanted to see ever since Michael Chandler got signed. Yeah. Everybody was like, well, Michael Chandler needs to get his feet wet a little bit. Why don't we get him in there with Justin Gaethje? Everybody's just like, oh, wait, we got to see that fight happen. We need to see it soon. I do think that whoever wins this fight obviously will get a title fight. There might be some waiting around, but a win over either of these guys for the person that wins is definitely enough to get yourself a title
Gaethje
fight.
for sure. Probably maybe because Michael had the title shot.
Both of their last fights were for the title, right? Because Justin hasn't been very active.
Yeah, well, that's right, because he fought Khabib.
Yeah.
And then he's just been kind of disappeared since then. But we know where he is. He's up in Colorado with Trevor Whitman, Kamaru Usman, and Rose Namajunas. So, I mean, when you're in the company, they say, look, let me see your 6 best friends, and I'll tell you where your life is headed. So if there's any truth to that, then Justin Gaethje's been doing some good things.
There's
and
some gold in his future.
Yeah, we'll see the best Justin Gaethje that we've seen yet. And I believe that because I believe the pressure got to him with Khabib, but also I just think Khabib he beat everybody he fought, and Justin was no different. But the way he performed against Tony Ferguson was spectacular. Yeah. And that was, say what you will about Tony now, and he is on the decline, but nobody before that fight was talking about Tony being on the decline.
No.
That was not in discussion. It was after that fight that people started talking about Tony being on the decline. So I'm actually, I don't want to make a full prediction yet. We'll wait till the fight gets closer, but I'm leaning towards Gaethje. I think Gaethje is a little bit better all around than Michael Chandler, but he does allow himself to get hit, and Michael Chandler throws bombs, and he's not afraid to get in your face and throw them. Like you said, it could be fight of the night, but it probably is more along the lines of performance of the night because somebody is going to have an insane performance and then do a backflip off of the cage that would make the divers that we just saw in the Olympics jealous.
Yeah, exactly. And they might land on one of the people in the athletic commission that's like in there just doing their job. Gaethje does get hit a lot, and Chandler is pretty accurate. He's kind of like a sniper with his power shots. He doesn't have a lot of flashy striking, but what he does is the fundamentals, and he does it really well.
It's the bread and butter.
Yeah, and he knows potatoes, that. He's a wrestler, so he sticks to what he knows. Like, obviously, if he can get a hold of Gaethje, we might see some sort of cool wrestling. We always talk about grappling exchanges, and we usually 9 times out of 10 are referring to jiu-jitsu exchanges. Yeah. You see some cool rolling, you see some cool transferring of the hips and transferring of the weight and stuff.
Submission attempts and then escapes thereafter.
Exactly. But this one, if we see some grappling, which I don't think we will, but if we do, it's going to be some cool wrestling type of exchanges where you see somebody flip and you might see some ankle picks and double legs and things like that. Yeah. But I think they both are going to respect each other's wrestling, and neither of them are really into doing the grappling stuff. They love to put on entertaining fights and strike. I think that since they're both tough as nails, it's going to be a late finish. But early prediction, this is early, and I have to see some things take place. But early on, I'm going Michael Chandler late finish because Gaethje gets hit. He gets hit a lot, and Chandler seems to be a very strong striker.
Yeah, like I said, it's the meat and potato striking.
Also beat Charles Oliveira in the first round. Lost to him in the fight, but that first round was trouble for Charles.
But for Charles being tough as nails, Michael Chandler could be the undisputed UFC world champion right now. But Bronx Oliveira is not going down that easily. Yeah. But I think, Michael Chandler, he has, and he even said, Henry Hooft, we keep it simple. I have 3 to 4 combinations. 3 to 4 combinations that I can hit really well. And I hit those combinations and I set them up with, takedown fakes and stuff like that. And I keep it simple, but I execute on the basics very well. And I think there's something to be said for that. I just think Trevor Whitman's camp right now, they're just kind of operating on another level. And I think when Kamaru Usman is your main training partner, I just am giving Gaethje a little bit of a nod here. My prediction may change as it goes. And we'll see when we do an official predictions video if we're still split on this one. You guys in the comments will have to settle the score for us.
Yeah, I'm really excited for it. We got a long ways for that one, but it was a good call for the UFC to go ahead and announce it because they always finish the year really strong, and this is the best way to start November. I think it's early November, and they're just gonna knock us out weekend after weekend, Saturday night after Saturday night with amazing fights, and this one's going to be probably a candidate for fight of the night or fight of the year, and maybe even performance of the year, depending on how the fight goes. But fight of the night or fight of the year is what I'm predicting early on.
Nice. I like it.
Yeah.
Well, guys, thanks so much for watching this video. Let us know in the comments, because this was a little bit different of a video. Do you like the longer form content? We've had some requests for that. People want, to get a little bit more of Nick and I's personality, get to know us a little better, hang out a little longer. And so we are always going to try to deliver to you guys what it is that you're looking for. So we appreciate it, and we hope you'll like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. And until the next one, guys, have a wonderful day and enjoy the fights this weekend.
Peace.